Realizing you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share this quote. Family is like a branches of tree. We all grow in different directions, yet our root remains as one. In every success story of a superhero, there will be someone behind that gives the strongest support. That is the family of Yang Bahagia Tan Sriani. We are all honored to have the lovely spouse of Yang Bahagia Tan Sriani, that is Yang Bahagia Tan Sriani. And Mr. Ismail as well today. With that great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to call upon Mr. Ismail bin Tan Sriani to come forward to read the citation. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The last time I was asked to stand in front of a group of people to read an essay about my father was probably, 25 years ago when I was 9. But this time around, I have the privilege of reading a tribute, but before a group of very distinguished guests. To introduce the man who we are honoring today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, Tan Sri Lemogi and Puan Sri, Datuk Sri Azman and Datin Sri, the top brass of TNB and the Board of Directors, Datuk, Datin, ladies and gentlemen. I guess I should start at the very beginning. It was a little over 3 years ago when one of my father's trusted doctors and friend came clean with me about Dad's health condition. It was delivered very businesslike, to conceal the heaviness of his concern. After getting over the initial shock, we dealt with it the best way we knew how, with humility, dignity, and plenty of humor. For us, the medical condition has become both a bane and a blessing for the family. While we deal with its inconveniences, it has also brought about an outpouring of love, compassion, and support from many people. We suddenly realized the true size of our extended family. People of various races, religious denominations, and from many generations. So on a typical day, our Shah Alam home is rarely void of visitors. And if you inspected the library, you will find enough stash of traditional medicine and bird's nests to start a pretty lucrative business. And as you can tell from my father's very youthful complexion, the bird's nest do work. Time does seem to tick a little bit faster these days. The medical news precipitated many things. Our spiritual journey, for instance, a deeper appreciation and gratitude for everything, and heightened sense of meaning. The other blessing, of course, is the reason why we are gathered here today, to celebrate the launch of this book, Memoirs by Tan Sri Ani Arup, a vignette of very personal stories written and compiled over the last 20 years. I should share with you that until I was in my late 20s, I was actually very shy of my father. He was for me larger than life. This huge, imposing figure. Dad's voice used to boom, I say, spoiler, sorry. Dad's voice used to boom and his staff used to quake in their boots when they had to see him. Even back then, Dad was not shy to disagree and be at loggerheads with his superiors. Well, don't we know all about that? As children, we understood that Dad had to work and serve the various banks, boards, companies, institutions which were entrusted under his care. So there was little time for much merrymaking and family bonding, which was fine. Instructions were left with Mom and the secretary, so Mom managed the household pretty much. In the corporate world, many urban legends circulated about Dad's prowess. There was an incident at an AGM in the late 80s where a typical noisy and boisterous shareholder, famous for his acid remarks and probing questions, suddenly had a fatal heart attack mid-sentence and dropped in the middle of the ballroom. So this added even more enigma to the Che Ani Arope. It was only when I left for the US the second time to pursue my MBA was when I began receiving long emails from Dad that were impeccably written, describing his childhood. I slowly began to discover the real man behind that booming voice, Dad's melodic way of storytelling, penchant for comic timing and vast knowledge of history. And many of these essays are encapsulated in the book. For us, having a unique surname attached might sometimes be a tad disadvantageous. For one, we can't just blend in. At times it might inspire cooperation and assistance, like an upgrade at the Malaysian Airlines counter sometimes. Or sometimes it elicited less than a desirable reception. But then that is how life is destined to be, I suppose, full of delightful surprises and curveballs to keep us grounded with humility. When you read this book, you will discover many stories about my dad and the family. You will hear a writing voice that is full of tenderness and hope. Many people read it for various sections. The long-awaited part, of course, is in relation to the IPPs. However, enough has been exchanged in the press, so I'm happy that in the end the chapter on the IPP shares the limelight without overshadowing the other essays surrounding the significant people in Dad's life. A chapter that is dedicated to our mom, one to our beloved and Miss Almarhum Sheikh Raja Ashman, and even our cat Gina has a special mention. Strangers still keep coming up to me and ask, so what is Tan Sri doing now? Is he still flying? Forgetting sometimes that Dad is already in his 80s. Well, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we can persuade my father to add more chapters to the upcoming second print. There are many more untold stories, and perhaps that will give us another excuse to have another gathering of this sort, inshallah. Alhamdulillah and shukr kepada Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for we are here in this intimate and meaningful majlis. Thank you to our generous and gracious hosts and the top brass of TNB. May Allah bless all of us today with continuous rizqi, excellent health and love. It is now with great pleasure to call on to the podium the man of the hour, Tan Sri Anyaro.
I came here with a prepared speech, but I was told by my family to keep it short and simple. So I have some notes. Try to find a page. I can't find a page, never mind. Never mind. It makes it even more exciting. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Muhyi, Muhyi TNB serta isteri yang berbahagia Puan Sri Elizabeth Muhyi, yang berbahagia Datuk Sri Engineer Azman Muhammad dan Datin Sri Nur Afizah Ahmad Nur, ahli-ahli lembaga pengarah TNB, barisan pengurusan tertinggi TNB, wakil-wakil kesatuan TNB dan para diplomasi. I must thank you all for gracing this occasion. Particularly, I want to thank Tan Sri Muhyi for agreeing to have this in Ilsas, Puan Sri, and Datuk Sri Azman to coordinate everything, to run it very nicely. Now, this all began about 4 years ago, when I wanted to renew my flying license at the age of 78. But I was told to check in at the nearest hospital, ASAP, as soon as possible. So I went in. I had 2 days. I was detained for that for 2 days, and they went through about 8 series of tests, both dignified and undignified. I say undignified because today we have more lady doctors than men. So one of the lady doctors said, "I'm going to perform a PR on you." Now I thought, not being medical trained, PR is some public relations stuff. But she put in a glove and poked my rectum. In that instant, I lost my dignity and all my pride. So, and then I had another complication. I couldn't ease myself. So she said, "Now I'm going to put a catheter in you." I said, "Okay, I have to stop my sarong and cover my face. You do what you have to do." Yeah? Now, after 10 days of that, I had to go to the toilet, and 2 young nurses at the age of 22, yeah, accompanied me, and then turned on the tap for sound effect. Nothing happened. And then they sat on both my sides and said, "Okay, shoo." So I told them, okay, let's have a deal. You all stand outside. Don't lock the door. Let me do as I want to do. So I found out I still had a bit of macho-ness in me. I had to do it standing up. So when I came out, one of the EBAM nurses looked at me. He says, "Tan Sri, tempat kami tak ada doktor, tak ada dispensari. Tapi bila orang tua kami tak boleh buang air, tak boleh pergi ke sungai, kami kata, sudah buka mulut tak, ha ha ha." So okay. So the next time I did, I went to the toilet and said, "Ha ha," and sure. So saya kata, "Mana kamu belajar ni?" "Oh, kami tengok penyu." "Penyu mau bertelur, dia buka mulut." "Ikan pun mau bertelur, dia buka mulut." "Ha ha." So mau pergi sungai pun kata, "Ha ha." So I told that to some of the doctors. To cut the long story short, at the end of the 2 days of dignified and undignified CAT scan, dog scan, macam-macam scan, the doctor came up to me and very seriously gave me the 3 words, very chilling words, which nobody liked to hear. "You have cancer." And then added in pula, 4th stage terminal. So you ask yourself, ini ada harapan kah? Is there any this thing left in me? Yeah? Or would life actually continue? So it took me some time. I had to sit down to absorb all these things. So the biggest thing was to come home and to tell my family of the situation. Of course, eventually I had to break up the news, and you had the usual reaction. And then I said, okay, now the doctor has given me between 6 to 2 years, 6 months or 2 years. So let's do something. So the first thing I did was to, because the house that we are staying, she took a loan, I took a loan. So this time I wanted to pass it on to her entirely. But then, my lawyer friend, my pilot instructor, who's here today, said, hey, you need a marriage certificate. I said, mana bisa ini? 52 years ago. Yeah? He said, no, without marriage certificate, anybody can claim to be your wife. So, okay. So I asked Zaina, hey, you already have a marriage certificate? She looked at me and said, all these 52 years, you never asked her. Pasal apa pula tanya marriage certificate? Allah, I nak tengok whether there is an expiry date. Kalau ada expiry date, I want to renew. For another 99 years, we'll write a renewal. Jangan jump to conclusions. But eventually, Rahima managed to track down, got to say, oh, they want to ask you who your witnesses are. Mana ni ingat who my witnesses are? It was 52 years ago. And then they eventually got there. Now the moral of the story is, all y'all in this room, please keep your marriage certificate. Very important. So, from 6 months, it went to 2 years. And then a lot of people ask me, how did you manage to outlive what the doctor told you? Oh, I said, I didn't pay my hospital bills. And so the doctors extended my life. Now, I must, so once you're given the 6 months, what do? Do you just mope around, or you go to into a withdrawal mode? A lot of people that I know, when they were told that they had cancer, they go into a withdrawal mode. They don't want to meet anybody, they want to talk to anybody, and then live the last few days or last few months in bitterness. Now, my advice is, if you have this sort of medical challenge, there's no need to be bitter. Concentrate in getting better. Because this medical challenge will either break you or make you. The choice is entirely yours. But keep a bit of sense of humor, because that softens a bit of the blows that life delivers. That's susah sikit lah. Now, I want to recognize here Tanti Abu Zarin. A lot of people talk about Ilsa, Uniten and so on. Now, I was able to see a bit further because I stood on the shoulders of giants, and he is one of the giants. So, when given this so-called 6 months, I sat down and said, oh, I better do something. So I started to write some of my memoirs. When I still remember from the age of 3, because that was the time when there was some family breakup. And so from the age of 3, and how I grew up amongst various races. In Penang, there were all sorts of races. There were Jewish, Arabs, of course, Hokkien, Chinese, Burmese, and Siamese and so on. So there were no problems there. And actually, the Jewish population spoke Arabic, most of them. And of course, amongst themselves, if they meet their Arab friends will ask them, how do you do? Isaiah Kinta. The answer is, they have to give a full reply. Ana khair, I am good. But that is not all. They have to add in another word, Alhamdulillah, God be praised. today, unfortunately, we cannot use that. Yeah? We can use topicon. Topicon tak apa lah. Alhamdulillah tak boleh pakai. Sad. Yeah? So that's where I brought it. And then at the age of 5.5, I was literally dragged and put in the mission school, in the Catholic mission school. And I, a Jewish boy, went to a Catholic school. And of course the Catholic lay brothers did not know how to handle us. And so put the bars a little higher for us. That we had to participate in prayers and so on and so forth and so forth. And because of that, I was nearly kicked out of school. Because came to Bible history. And lay brother talked about Abraham not having any sons. So Angel Gabriel appeared and said, you take the Egyptian maid to the desert. I think that was the first jealousy recorded in the Bible. So because Sarah did not want Hajar to be around, so Hajar had to go out. Then the brother said, after getting the first son, whose name was Ishmael, the angel Gabriel appeared again and said, you must sacrifice your son. And his name was Isaac. And of course I raised my hand as a correction. His first son's name was Ishmael. And for that I was sent to the director's office. And my Jewish friend supported me. So yeah. And then both of us were sent, and we were told, you can listen, but do not participate. So I asked my Jewish friend, Isaac, why did you support me? Hey, because I want to prove that we came from the first mothers, from Sarah, Bani Israel. All the Arabs came from the slave mother. They were second class. So go ahead and support me. So I had this mixed upbringing. So no problem. So when I finished my book, two ladies, Professor Rokaya and Faria, are you around? Could you please stand up? Be recognized. They volunteered to do my editing, to put the things in order, in sequence, so that it makes a bit better reading. But they had too much trust in my English. So my first chapter had a lot of spelling mistakes. They missed that out. I said, if you were to put me against a third grade child in school, the third grader would beat me in spelling. I'm still very bad at spelling at the age of 82. Now, I'm running out of time now. Now, in conclusion, I'd like to say this. In all my near 82 years of life, of course, I made some silly things to my family, to my close friends, to my work colleagues. Here I ask for your forgiveness. And to those whom I have helped, supposedly, I wish I could have done more. And to those that I did not help, I hope you will understand. But to those who have helped me, especially in the last 4 years, I don't know whether Dr. Sri Khalil is here. He brought it up to the board to have my expensive medical bills picked up by TNB, and to my family, to my close friends who are here, my supporting friends, I say thank you very much. And with this, thank you again. And I said, well, hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Pansri, for the lovely speech. Thank you also to Mr. Ismail for the citation just now. Hadirin sekalian, seterusnya majlis dengan penuh hormat mempersilakan Yang Bahagia Tan Sri Yomogi Pengerusi TNB untuk memberikan ucapan dan seterusnya melancarkan Memoir of Tan Sri Ani Arif. Dipersilakan.
Yang bahagia Saudari Pengacara Majlis, Yang bahagia Tan Sri Dr. Ani Arif dan Puan Sri Saina, dan seterusnya tuan-tuan dan puan-puan sekalian. Lebih dulu saya suka mengucapkan terima kasih kerana bagi pihak TNB kita dapat bersama-sama pagi ini to launch Dr. Tan Sri Dr. Ani Arif memoirs. At TNB, Tan Sri Ani is a name that has always been highly regarded. He, as we have heard earlier on, was chairman of TNB when TNB was first corporatized in 1990, and then subsequently became the executive chairman 1992 till 1996. In TNB, his name has also been recognized not only because he spoke with regard to what was even realized among the TNB staff in those days, that the term of the first IPP was a little bit unfair from TNB's point of view. But what is not generally known to the public eyes is the role he played in first expanding the road of Alsace, where we are now in, which was started earlier than his time. That was to emerge to become University Tenaga Nasional in 1997. And Tan Sri Ani Arif was highly responsible for getting that thought through and brought up. This reflects in him his constant and continuous interest in human capital development. In reading his memoirs, I note that he was keen in terms of human resource development in the various agencies and companies that he was involved in. And one of his comments in the book was how important it is for Malaysia, for Malaysians, to acquire intellectual knowledge and expertise. And that has been one of the legacy that Tan Sri Ani left for TNB. So when the idea of launching this book at TNB was mooted, I was at that time in the Channel Islands, in Guernsey, and somebody SMS'd me and asked whether it would be all right if we were to have this book launched at TNB. And of course, Tan Sri, I was delighted to say yes, we had to do it. And Tan Sri Asman also agreed with that. So here we are this morning. So I do like to welcome you all, those who are friends of Tan Sri Ani, those who are his colleagues when he was still working, and those who have always admired the way he did his work. But as we have heard from his son, and also from Tan Sri Ani himself, it is not just because of his role in TNB that we are here. It is much more important than that, because in the content of the book, you will come to realize that in him and his life, there are a lot of things that we, Malaysian of 2013, Malaysian of 2014, have a lot, I think, to think through and glean some lesson from them. Tan Sri Ani was referring to his background in school, when his best friend was a Jewish boy. He also narrated a little story when he was in Lincoln College in New Zealand, when an Anglican priest questioned why Muslims could not eat pork, and make a bit of a very comment that priests should not have ever made. And Ani was able to correct him by quoting a verse from the Bible, Leviticus, I think it was. That put the Anglican priest in his place. There was no further comment with regard to that topic. Similarly, currently there's still a continuing debate on the use of the word Allah. Again, Tan Sri Ani referred to it just now. And in his book, he made quite clear that others could also be allowed to use it. And of course, for me, that has a very personal dignity to it. Because in the Iban language, when we pray in Christian faith, we have to use the word Allah Ta'ala to refer to God. And if not Bahasa, it is Iban for me. So it is that element of acceptance, that element of tolerance, that element of openness which weaves through the pages of the book is another main point which I think is worth noting in reading memoirs that Tan Sri Ani has written. So yes, let me once again say how delighted we at TNB is being associated with Tan Sri Ani's memoirs. One of the early part of the book refers to how Professor Noor Farida and Professor Rugayat, who together with Tan Sri Ani are all Fulbrighters during their time, were taken with the fact that Tan Sri Ani, as we have seen earlier this morning here, has this element of humor always with him. And in the book it says the two editors, at least the way I interpret it, were much impressed with the element of humor that was it, and persuaded Tan Sri Ani to make sure he has his memoir written. And I hope that was one of the reasons, other than the personal health challenge that he faced, helped to further convince Tan Sri Ani that the memoirs is worth writing. And I think that both the editors are here with us this morning. I do like to acknowledge them as well, Tan Sri, if you don't mind. Well, what is important is I like to acknowledge all of you who are present here. I know Tan Sri Ani and his family are very honored and delighted that his friends, many of his friends are here. And I also like to acknowledge the thing that was read by his son, how important family is, particularly when we reach a stage, Ani is 80 berapa tadi, 82. Saya 10 tahun muda sikit. So, but nevertheless, we are getting to that stage in life where one of the appreciation is to recognize the role that families and friendship have in what we're doing. And that's one note that I like to thank you all for also being present here this morning. With those remarks, it is therefore my pleasure to officially launch the book, Memoirs of Country Dr. Aniaro. It is a book that is well worth reading. It has some element of humor injected in it. And those of you who know Arnie well, of course, realize that there are many humors which are not included in it. For instance, when people talk of Mat Saleh, apparently, according to Tansiani, years ago, he was telling us, I happened to be there, that because in Penang in those days, there were a number of mad, drunken sailors, and they called them drunken sailors. But the Malays could not pronounce drunken sailors well, so they called them Mat Saleh. That's one or the other thing. The other thing which I remember, my wife said I should say this. It may be not well taken. But because I heard Tansiani was also making some little joke about something, not the same, but something that people might consider a bit sensitive. You see, apparently, according to, I don't know whether I remember this correctly, there was a story about two retirees somewhere in a pub in London. And they were worried about whether they're going to continue receiving the pension checks. And then one of them was asking, are we still going to receive our pension check? And then the other retirees say, yeah, but don't you receive this every month, this letter OHMS? And then the other said, yeah, I do receive OHMS. But you know what that means now? It means only Hindu, Muslim and Sikhs. But you see, that's the sort of thing that happened in England. But you see, they also have their need to try and maintain that level of understanding among the communities in England, as we do that also in Malaysia. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to launch Memoirs of Country Aniaro. It is my great pleasure to also repeat again that TNB is very delighted to be associated with it. I know that I'm happy to see many former TNB staff, LNN staff who are here with us this morning. Tan Sri Abu Zarin, Tan Sri Jalaluddin, to Iba, to Sidek, everybody who are here, who used to be working in LLN at TNB at the time when Tan Sri Ani was here. Yusuf, Hadi, quite a number at the back there, all retirees. They're still relatively young. Many of them much younger than I am anyway. So that's it. Thank you very much. Enjoy reading it. I have enjoyed reading it, and I'm sure you will. Thank you.
I would like to invite stage as well Yang Bahagia Tan Sri Dato' Dr. Aniaro and Yang Bahagia Dato' Sri Engineer Azman Muhammad to join for the launching. Hadirin sekalian, upacara pelancaran Memoir of Tan Sri Aniaro dengan segala hormat yang dijemput Yang Bahagia Tan Sri Leomogi untuk melancarkan dengan meletakkan pena pelancaran tersebut sebagai simbolik pelancaran. Persilakan. Yang Itu dia. That rebuilder book inside dijemput yang bahagian Tan Sri Ani untuk menyerahkan naskah kepada yang bahagian Tan Sri Ani sebagai tanda kenangan. Dan satu lagi kepada yang bahagian Datuk Sri Let's have a group photo, Tan Sri. Yeah, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give another big round of applause for the memoirs of Tan Sri Ani. One good reason why this book should be on every home is only 143 pages, it's easy to read and will definitely give you a true story of a hero that will touches your heart. Untuk makluman hadirin sekalian, sempena pelancaran pada hari ini, buku tersebut ada dijual dengan harga yang sangat istimewa, iaitu hanya RM70, di mana harga pasaran adalah RM80 senaskah. Jadi jangan lupa bawa pulang buku tersebut yang ada dijual di ruang lega seminar ini. Bagi pihak yang bahagia Tan Sri Ani Arif dan keluarga, ribuan terima kasih kepada semua atas kehadiran sekali lagi. Terima kasih kepada yang bahagia Tan Sri atas pelancaran. Seterusnya para jemputan dijemput untuk menikmati jamuan yang disediakan di luar Dewan ini dan di atas bahagian atas. Terima kasih, sehingga berjumpa lagi. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera.
Itu lah.